interesting. As we prepare to talk to Kip Eidberg of the Association of Equipment Manufacturers, the AEM, you may have heard of it, represents about 1,000 companies that make equipment for any number of industries here. And they just finished a survey on supply chains. Nearly all respondents, 98%, still face supply chain issues, with more than half experiencing continuously worsening supply chain conditions. This is not exactly what we have been hearing. And as we try, of course, to win the war on inflation, this is a big part of it. Kip is Senior Vice President for Government and Industry Relations at the association. And Kip, I appreciate you being here. Did you expect numbers like this? This is pretty dour.
Yeah, it sure is, Joe. And thanks for having me back on the show. As you said, the situation has not improved for our industry, and I think for the manufacturing sector at large. With the pandemic largely in the rearview mirror, our industry is still struggling, and they're struggling primarily with sourcing components. If you look at some of the results from our survey, lead times have more than tripled since 2019. So that's before the pandemic. And year to date, we are seeing an average production loss of about 12% and are forecasting continued production loss exceeding 8% in 2023. And this is especially critical, Joe, given that many manufacturers, many of our members, are already fully sold out for 2023.
Wow. So where are those components coming from? Are those made in the USA or outside of the country?
Well, they're coming from around the world, and I can tell you that where we're seeing the biggest challenge right now are with smaller suppliers in the United States. They really bore the brunt of a lot of the impact from the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic downturn. So they're struggling to get back to where they were before the pandemic. But obviously, it's a global economy. Many of our member companies are sourcing components from around the world, and we're still dealing with lag times at ports, infrastructure that's not keeping up, and making it very difficult to move components to factories and finished products out to markets around the world.
What's it doing to prices?
Prices have remained roughly where they were 2022, early 2022. So obviously inflation is contributing to it, as you noted at the lead-in. But overall, we're not seeing prices going or increasing as much as you might have thought, given some of these dour findings from the survey. But really, where the problem is the demand is high for equipment, and the supply right now is really not where it needs to be for us to continue to help drive the economic recovery and create more jobs here in America.
Well, it's eating into your production levels, right? You're not able to keep up the growth that you want to. Is that a fair statement?
That is an absolutely fair statement. That's right. And we, for many of our member companies, many of the segments that we serve, we are seeing demand well exceed where it was going into the pandemic. And unfortunately, as you noted, we can't take advantage of that right now. If you wanted to buy a brand new tractor, you'd be hard pressed to take possession of that this year, and you might, in some cases, depending on make and model, have to wait well into 2024. And that's unfortunate because when demand is strong, right, we'd like to churn out as much equipment as we can.
Absolutely. And this is, I'll tell you, there is a narrative that the supply chain issues have been resolved in many cases, that the administration has put a lot of time and investment into untying the ports the way we had ships lined up off the coast of Long Beach and L.A. and other, obviously, ports in the country here. Is that simply not true, or is this specific to your industry?
Well, it's partially true, and the administration and Congress in general has made some great progress. We saw that with the passage of the CHIPS and Science Act, the Ocean Shipping Reform Act, and just the investment of large investment of money into our infrastructure. Right. So some of those challenges that we all remember from the pandemic, as you mentioned, those ships lined up outside ports on both the West Coast and the East Coast. Those problems are largely being resolved. But when you've had suppliers go out of business, particularly in the U.S., but also around the world, and still struggling to get back to where they were in terms of their output, that's where the biggest challenge is right now. And that obviously feeds into the workforce challenge that we face. Even if you're able to weather the pandemic, weather the economic downturn, and survive and continue to produce critical components that we need, if you don't have the workers to meet the demand from our member companies, well, then that's where it falls apart. And we're starting, seeing that impact throughout our production.
We're talking with Kip Eidberg, Senior VP for Government and Industry Relations at the Association of Equipment Manufacturers, in a surprising and not in a good way survey on supply chain here. Let's talk solutions for a minute, Kip. You've been complimentary so far to the administration and Congress, but what do you need to fix this?
Well, I think first and foremost, I think it's important to acknowledge that there is no single solution or easy answer when it comes to supply chains. I think it's going to take the public and the private sectors coming together and working hand in glove to not only identify the problems, but then come up with some solutions to them. Obviously, we need to continue to make investments in domestic manufacturing capabilities. We need to continue to make investments in our infrastructure. I mentioned the ports earlier, but really it's all infrastructure, because it does us no good if components can come into the port, get offloaded, then they get stuck somewhere, going to a factory. We need to continue to invest in research and development so that we can bring some of this production back to the United States. And next time we're dealing with a crisis, we're not as badly impacted as we were, because we have enough of a domestic base to meet demand, or at least to meet some demand. So I think it starts with that. We'd like to see more of what Congress has done already. And obviously, that's the message that we're going to continue to deliver, right? We need lawmakers to come together and work on actual solutions to some of this. And then finally, we need to do more to invest in our workforce. We are facing a real crisis here, Joe. 2, 3, 4 years from now, we're gonna be in the midst of a workforce crisis on the manufacturing sector that we have never seen before. Millions of positions will go unfilled if we don't get more folks into the manufacturing space. And obviously, that's almost a societal effort that we need to see in terms of promoting manufacturing writ large.
How much of an impact would it have on your industry if the Biden administration removed the Trump-era tariffs on China?
It would certainly help. It would certainly help, although I will say that many of our member companies have lived to learn with them.
How about that?
Obviously, whenever you can free up capital, instead of paying up to 25% on critical inputs, you can put that to use investing in American manufacturing capabilities, investing in R&D, hiring more people. So it would clearly help, and we continue to push at least for a process whereby our member companies can make the case and get an answer within 30 to 60 days and not wait for 2 years in limbo on whether or not these tariffs will remain or not.
Yeah, sure.
But I think the answer is probably beyond tariffs, right? We simply just need to strengthen our domestic manufacturing capabilities. That includes obviously the production, but also everything that goes from when that piece of equipment rolls off the line and goes out to markets and when those components come in. So it's a complicated problem we face, but I can tell you one thing, Joe, having watched Congress in action over the past few weeks, whatever they have been doing to date is not helping, and we really need them to come together, stop playing politics, and start working on some real solutions for the American people.
Yeah, this is that part's not getting any better, and when I hear more people like you talking about it, it really tells me something. Lastly, Kip, how much of this is an issue of ports being clogged versus the so-called last mile? I know we're still having trouble finding, to your point, workers to drive trucks and do the work at the ports as well to try to get goods to market.
Last mile remains a big problem, and I would say right now that's where we're seeing most of the bottlenecks. We talked about that just a little while ago. The congestion is starting to ease up. But the last mile piece is critical. And I should say one final piece, too, is that and we're hopefully seeing some action now on the part of Congress to come down on this sort of behavior. But up until recently, it was not uncommon for export-ready goods to sit at a port while a ship largely empty raced back to Asia to pick up goods to bring them back to the U.S. because it just paid so much more to move goods from Asia to the United States than the other way around. And having empty ships sail, whether it's to China, to Vietnam, to Australia, et cetera. That's just no way of helping resolve the supply chain challenge that we're facing. So we're hopefully going to see some change in behavior there on the part of some of the carriers. But last mile is critical, and that goes back again to we need that infrastructure money to be put to good use around the ports and really throughout the country, Joe.
This has been very helpful, Kip. We learned a lot. Kip Eidberg from the Association of Equipment Manufacturers.